The great chamber of the Galactic Expansion Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its walls were made of black stone taken from conquered worlds. Its ceiling showed a living map of the galaxy, with 10,000 stars glowing red to mark the territories of the Valorian Dominion. Every red star represented a species that had bent its knee to Valorian rule. Every red star was a reminder of 10,000 years of unbroken conquest. High Commander Vexal stood at the center of the chamber. His gray skin caught the light of the star map above. His four eyes moved slowly across the gathered council members. They were the most powerful beings in known space. They commanded fleets that could burn worlds to ash. They controlled trade routes that fed 100 billion souls, and they all answered to him. "Bring forward the scout report," Vexal said. His voice was calm. It was always calm. He had never needed to raise it. When the High Commander spoke, the galaxy listened. A young officer stepped forward. Her name was Taylor, and she had spent 3 years in the deep reaches of an unexplored spiral arm. Her ship had mapped over 200 systems. Most were empty. Some held primitive life that would need another million years before it could build fire. But one system was different. "The system is located in Sector 7G, Taylor said. She touched a panel, and the star map shifted. A single yellow star appeared, surrounded by 8 planets. The locals call their star Sol. They call their world Earth. The council members leaned forward. New species were always interesting. New species meant new resources, new labor, new territory. "Tell us about them," Vexal said. Taylor pulled up images and data streams. The chamber filled with pictures of a blue and green world. Cities of glass and steel covered its surface. Primitive vehicles moved through its skies. Small satellites orbited the planet like toys floating around a child. "They call themselves humans," Taylor explained. "They are a young species. They have only had technology for a few hundred years. Their space travel is limited to their own solar system. They have sent a few probes to nearby planets, but they have not yet developed faster than light travel." A council member named Draven laughed. He was old and fat and had grown rich from the conquest of a dozen worlds. "So they are children," he said. "They cannot even leave their own system. This will be simple." "There is more," Taylor continued. "The humans are not united. They have divided their world into many nations. These nations often fight each other. They have wars over land, resources, and ideas. They are fractured and weak." More laughter filled the chamber. A divided species was the easiest kind to conquer. They would be too busy fighting each other to resist the Dominion. Vexal raised a hand, and the laughter stopped. "What is their military capability?" Taylor hesitated for just a moment. "They have weapons that can destroy cities. Nuclear devices, they call them. They have armies and navies and air forces. But compared to our technology, they are primitive. Their fastest ships would take years to cross distances we cover in hours. Their strongest weapons could not scratch the paint on our weakest vessel." Vexal nodded slowly. This was good news. Easy conquest meant fewer losses. Fewer losses meant more resources for the next conquest. The machine of empire needed fuel, and weak species provided the best fuel. "What resources does their world offer?" Vexal asked. "Their planet is rich in water and minerals," Taylor said. "Their population numbers in the billions. They would provide excellent labor for our mining operations. Their world sits at a useful position for future expansion into that region of space." Vexal had heard enough. He turned to the council. "I move that we mark this world for acquisition. Standard protocol. Ultimatum followed by subjugation." The vote was quick. It was unanimous. Earth became target 4771 in the Dominion database. Just another number. Just another world that would soon bow to Valorian rule. The standard ultimatum message was composed within the hour. It was the same message the Dominion had sent to thousands of worlds over 10,000 years. The words were simple and direct. Surrender unconditionally within 30 rotations or face complete destruction. No negotiation, no mercy. This was the way of the Dominion. The message was sent across the void of space. It would take only moments to reach Earth. The humans would receive it, and their fate would be sealed. Across the galaxy, other species watched with a mixture of pity and resignation. They had seen this happen many times before. The Valorians would mark a world. The world would either surrender or be destroyed. There was no third option. There had never been a third option. The Krellian traders closed their shipping routes near Earth. There was no point in doing business with a species that would soon be enslaved. The Navari scientists deleted Earth from their list of potential research partners. The Binding Collective sent a quiet message of condolence to the humans, though they knew the humans would not understand what was coming. Everyone knew how this story would end. The Valorians had never failed, not once in 10,000 years. Not against the mighty Draken Empire, not against the ancient Silurian Federation, not against any of the countless species that had tried to resist. A fleet of 300 warships was assigned to the conquest. It was actually larger than necessary for such a primitive world. But Vexal believed in overwhelming force. Fear was a weapon just like any other. When the humans saw 300 ships darkening their skies, they would understand the hopelessness of resistance. The fleet assembled at the edge of Dominion space. Soldiers were briefed, weapons were checked, landing craft were prepared. Everything followed the standard procedure. This conquest would be like 1,000 others before it. Days passed, then weeks. The 30 rotations began to count down. 29, 28, 27. Still, there was no response from Earth. Some council members found this amusing. The humans were probably too stunned to respond. They were probably running around their little planet in panic, trying to understand the message they had received. Perhaps they did not even believe it was real. Primitive species often had trouble accepting that they were not alone in the universe. Vexel was not amused, he was patient. He had conquered enough worlds to know that every species reacted differently to the ultimatum. Some surrendered immediately. Some tried to fight. Some tried to hide. Some went silent and hoped the threat would go away. It never went away. The fleet commanders reported that all preparations were complete. They were ready to move on his order. 300 ships, 50,000 soldiers. Enough firepower to turn Earth into a burning rock if the humans chose to resist. 20 rotations passed, then 25. The council grew impatient. They wanted to see the conquest begin. They wanted to watch the human cities fall. They wanted to count the new slaves and resources that would flow into Dominion coffers. On the 29th rotation, Vexel stood in his private command center. He looked at the star map on his wall. The yellow dot of Sol glowed like a tiny ember in the darkness. Tomorrow that ember would belong to the Dominion. His aide entered the room. "Hi, Commander. The fleet is ready for departure at dawn." Vexel nodded. "Good, we will." He stopped. A light was flashing on his communication panel. An incoming message. His aide checked the source and went pale. "Hi, Commander. It is from Earth." Vexel turned slowly. After 29 days of silence, the humans had finally responded. On the very last day, at the very last moment. He felt a small spark of curiosity. What would these primitive creatures say? Would they beg for mercy? Would they offer tribute? Would they threaten and bluster like so many others had done before they died? "Play the message," Vexel commanded. The screen flickered to life. There was no video. No image of a human leader pleading for his world. There was only text. Simple words in the Valorian language, translated from whatever primitive tongue the humans used. The message was short. Vexel read it 3 times to make sure he understood. "Are you certain you wish to proceed? We advise reconsideration." That was all. No fear, no submission, no desperate plea. Just a question. Just a piece of advice. As if the humans were doing the Dominion a favor by warning them. Vexel stared at the words for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. The sound echoed through his command center. His aide looked confused and frightened. "Archive this message," Vexel said between laughs. "I want to show it to the council. These humans have spirit. I will enjoy breaking them." He turned back to the star map. Tomorrow the fleet would depart. In a few days, Earth would burn or bow. Either way, the humans would learn their place in the universe. But somewhere deep in the back of his mind, in a place he would never admit existed, a tiny voice whispered a question. Why had the humans waited until the last day? Why had they sent such a strange message? And why, despite their obvious weakness, did they sound so calm? Vexel pushed the thoughts away. It did not matter. Nothing these primitives could do would change what was coming. The Dominion had never failed, and it would not fail now. The fleet would launch at dawn. Earth had no idea what was coming, or so he believed. The council chamber erupted in laughter when Vexel showed them the human message. The words hung in the air above the central platform, projected for all to see. Are you certain you wish to proceed? We advise reconsideration. Drebin slapped his thick hands together in amusement. These creatures have courage. I will give them that. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. Other council members joined in the mockery. They made jokes about the primitives who thought they could warn the Dominion. They compared the humans to insects threatening to sting a giant. The laughter echoed off the black stone walls and filled the massive chamber. Vexel let them enjoy the moment. Morale was important. A laughing army was a confident army, and a confident army won battles. He waited until the noise died down before raising his hand. The fleet departs in 3 hours, he announced. Standard conquest protocol. I expect this world to be under our control within 10 days. The council members nodded their approval. Some were already calculating how much profit they would make from human slaves and Earth's resources. Others were thinking about the political advantages of being associated with another successful conquest. Business as usual for the Dominion. But as the council began to disperse, a technician rushed into the chamber. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She ran directly to Vexel and bowed so quickly she almost fell. High Commander, there is a problem with the human message, she gasped. Vexel frowned. What kind of problem? The origin verification, sir. Standard protocol requires us to confirm the source of any communication. We trace the signal path of the human message. And, the technician swallowed hard, the message was not sent from Earth, High Commander. Silence fell over the chamber. The council members who had been walking toward the exit stopped and turned back. Vexel felt something cold touch the base of his spine. Explain, he said. The technician pulled up a star map on the central display. Red dots appeared across the galaxy, scattered across thousands of light years. The message was sent simultaneously from 17 different points in space, sir. These are the locations. Vexel stared at the map. Some of the dots were in unexplored regions. Some were in the territory of allied species. And one dot was deep inside Dominion space, in a system that had been under their control for 3,000 years. That is impossible, Drebin said. His laughter was gone. Humans do not have faster-than-light communication. They do not have any presence outside their own system. Our scouts confirm this. The data does not lie, Counselor, the technician replied. The signals were sent at the exact same moment from all 17 locations. Each signal was identical. Each signal was definitely sent by human technology. The chamber fell into chaos. Council members shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded to know how this could happen. Others insisted it must be a trick or an error. Fear began to spread like a disease through the room. Vexel raised his hand, and slowly the noise died down. His face showed no emotion. He had not survived 10,000 years of conquest by panicking at every surprise. This is a deception, he said calmly. The humans are primitive, but they are clearly clever. They have somehow managed to plant false signals to confuse us. Perhaps they had help from another species. Perhaps they found some ancient technology they do not fully understand. It does not matter. High Commander, the technician began. It does not matter, Vexel repeated, his voice harder now. We have 300 warships. We have weapons that can crack planets. Whatever trick the humans have used, it will not save them. The fleet will depart as scheduled. The council members nodded, though their confidence seemed less certain than before. They filed out of the chamber, whispering to each other in worried tones. Vexel remained behind. He turned to the technician. You will tell no one else about this. Run the analysis again. Find the error in your data. There must be an explanation. Yes, High Commander, the technician said. But her eyes told a different story. She had already run the analysis a dozen times. There was no error. 3 hours later, the fleet entered hyperspace. 300 ships folded reality around themselves and vanished from Dominion space. They would emerge near Earth in 2 standard days. Vexel watched them go from his command center. He told himself that everything was under control. He told himself that the human message was nothing but a bluff. He told himself that in 10 days, Earth would be just another red dot on the star map. He almost believed it. The fleet had been in hyperspace for 6 hours when the second message arrived. Vexel was alone in his private quarters when his communication panel lit up. He expected a routine update from the fleet commanders. He expected reports on ship status and crew readiness. What he got was something very different. The message was addressed directly to him, not to the High Commander of the Valorian Dominion, to him personally, to Vexel, and it was from the humans. He opened the message with trembling hands. He told himself he was not afraid. He told himself it was simply surprise, but his hands shook anyway. The message contained a list of names, 4 names, his children, his 4 children who lived on 4 different worlds across the Dominion. Each name was followed by an address, exact coordinates, building numbers, room locations. At the bottom of the message was a single line of text. We mean no threat to your family. We simply wish you to understand that we know things we should not know. Please reconsider. Vexel stared at the screen for a very long time. His children were scattered across the Dominion specifically for their safety. Their locations were the most closely guarded secret in his life. Only 3 people in the entire galaxy knew where all 4 of them lived, and 2 of those people were dead. How did the humans know? His first instinct was to call his children, to warn them, to send guards. But warn them of what? The humans had said they meant no threat, and even if they did mean harm, what could he do? If the humans knew where his children were, they had probably known for a long time. If they wanted to hurt them, they would have done so already. No, this was not a threat. It was a demonstration. The humans were showing him that they had capabilities far beyond what the Dominion had assumed. They were showing him that all the intelligence reports were wrong. They were showing him that the Valorians had made a terrible mistake. Vexel's hands hovered over the communication controls. He could recall the fleet. He could stop the conquest before it began. He could demand more investigation into what the humans really were. But then what? He would look weak. The council would question his judgment. His enemies would use the moment to move against him. 10,000 years of Dominion dominance would be shattered by hesitation, by fear of a single primitive species. No, he could not show weakness. He would not show weakness. The fleet would continue. The conquest would proceed. Whatever secrets the humans were hiding, 300 warships would uncover them. He deleted the message and told himself it never existed. But sleep did not come that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those 4 names. He saw the addresses he had never shared with anyone. He saw proof that the humans knew things that were impossible to know. The fleet was now 12 hours from Earth. In 12 hours, the truth would be revealed. Whatever the humans were hiding, the Dominion would find it. Vexel stood at his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 300 ships were carrying 50,000 soldiers toward a small blue world. Somewhere out there, a species that should have been helpless was sending messages that should have been impossible. He thought about the first message. Are you certain you wish to proceed? We advise reconsideration. For the first time in his very long life, Vexel was not certain about anything. But it was too late to turn back now. The machine of conquest was in motion. The Dominion did not retreat. The Dominion did not reconsider. The Dominion conquered. Whatever waited for them at Earth, they would face it with fire and steel. He just hoped that fire and steel would be enough. Across the galaxy, word of the human messages began to spread. Technicians talked to friends. Officers whispered to family members. Rumors flew from system to system at the speed of light. The humans knew things they should not know. The humans had technology they should not have. The humans were not what they appeared to be. Fear has a way of growing in darkness, and the darkness of space was very, very large. By the time the fleet reached Earth, the entire galaxy would be watching. By the time the fleet reached Earth, everyone would want to know the answer to the same question. What were the humans really, and why were they not afraid? The rumors could not be contained. Within hours of the second human message, whispers had spread through every level of Dominion society. Something was wrong with the Earth conquest. Something was very, very wrong. Vexel tried to control the information. He ordered silence. He threatened punishment. He denied that any unusual communications had been received. But rumors are like water. They find every crack and flow through every gap. The truth always escapes, no matter how hard you try to hold it. The council demanded an emergency meeting. Vexel had no choice but to attend. When he entered the great chamber, he found every seat filled. Council members, military commanders, intelligence officers, and senior officials from across the Dominion had gathered. Their faces showed a mixture of fear and anger. "Tell us everything," Draven demanded. His usual confidence was gone. He looked like an old man who had just learned that death was real. Vexel told them about the 17 signal sources. He told them about the message containing his children's locations. He watched their expressions change from worry to terror. "How is this possible?" a council member named Saran asked. "Our scouts spent 3 years studying the humans. They are primitive. They cannot even travel faster than light." "Clearly our scouts missed something," Vexel replied. "Missed something?" Saran stood up, his voice rising. "They missed faster-than-light communication relays scattered across the galaxy? They missed a spy network that penetrates the highest levels of Dominion security? They missed whatever technology allowed the humans to know your children's locations?" Vexel had no answer. He had been asking himself the same questions for hours. An old voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to look. The speaker was Counselor Arvex, the oldest member of the council. He had served the Dominion for 800 years. His body was weak and withered, but his mind was still sharp. "I would like to access the historical archives," Arvex said slowly. "The deep archives, the records from before the Dominion existed." Draven frowned. "Why? What could ancient history tell us about the humans?" Arvex smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because I remember a legend, a story that was old when I was young, a story about a species that seeded life across the galaxy. They were called the Gardeners." The chamber fell silent. Some of the younger council members looked confused, but the older ones, those who had lived for centuries, showed recognition and fear. "The Gardeners were a myth," Saran said, "a fairy tale told to explain why so many species evolved independently." "Perhaps," Arvex said, "or perhaps the myth was created to hide a truth that was too dangerous to speak openly. The legend says the Gardeners planted life on thousands of worlds. They watched their creations grow and evolve. They guided them from the shadows. And then, when their work was done, they disappeared." "Disappeared?" Vexel asked. "The legend says they never left. They simply stopped being visible. They are still out there watching, waiting, making sure their garden grows as it should." The chamber erupted in argument. Some dismissed the story as nonsense. Others demanded that the archives be searched. A few sat in stunned silence, calculating what it would mean if the legend was true. Vexal raised his hand for silence. "Search the archives. Find everything we have on this legend. I want answers before the fleet reaches Earth." Teams of researchers dove into the oldest records the Dominion possessed. They searched through data crystals that had not been accessed in millennia. They translated languages that had been dead for longer than most species had existed. What they found was terrifying. The legend of the Gardeners appeared in the ancient records of dozens of species. The stories were remarkably consistent. A powerful species had existed before all others. They had created life, spread it across the galaxy, and then vanished. Some records called them gods. Others called them creators. A few called them simply the Old Ones. But the most disturbing discovery came from the navigation archives. Ancient maps showed a region of space that all early species had avoided. It was marked with symbols that translated roughly as nursery or protected zone or do not disturb. At the center of that zone was a small yellow star with a single habitable world: Earth. When this discovery was reported to the council, hysteria took hold. The great chamber that had seen 10,000 years of confident conquest suddenly felt like a tomb. Council members shouted and argued and demanded answers that no one could provide. Had the Dominion just threatened the creators of the galaxy? Had they sent 300 ships to attack the species that had seeded all life? Had they made themselves enemies of gods? The panic spread beyond the council chamber. News of the ancient records leaked to allied species. Within hours, trade partners began canceling contracts. Vassal species started asking uncomfortable questions. The great network of power and profit that held the Dominion together began to show cracks. The Krellian traders sent an emergency message. We require clarification regarding your Earth operation. Our historical records also mention a protected zone. We cannot be associated with any action that violates ancient protocols. The Novari scientists transmitted a single question: what have you done? Even the Binding Collective, a species so ancient they remembered the formation of their home star, sent a warning. The quarantine around Seoul exists for a reason. You have been warned. Vexel stood in the center of the storm. He had built his entire career on strength and certainty. Now both were crumbling, but he could not show weakness. He could not recall the fleet without proof. He could not bow to legends and rumors. The fleet will continue, he announced. We will not be frightened by old stories and coincidences. When our ships reach Earth, they will find the truth. And I believe the truth will be much simpler than these wild theories suggest. Some council members nodded. Others looked doubtful, but none dared to openly challenge the High Commander. Not yet. The fleet was now 6 hours from Earth. 294 ships had maintained formation throughout the journey. 6 had dropped out of hyperspace early due to technical problems. Standard issues, nothing unusual. Then the third message arrived. It was broadcast on every frequency. Every ship in the fleet received it simultaneously. Every communication officer saw it at the exact same moment. The message contained a single image, a schematic, detailed technical drawings showing the exact design of every warship in the fleet, engine layouts, weapon placements, shield generators, life support systems, everything. Attached to the schematic was a note. We designed the technology that your conquered species used to build these ships. We have always known exactly what you have. We know exactly what you can do, and we know exactly what you cannot do. This is your final warning. Please reconsider. Fleet Commander Korvax stared at the schematic on his screen. He was a veteran of 30 conquests. He had faced enemies that outnumbered him 10 to 1. He had never felt fear like this. The schematic was accurate, perfectly accurate. It showed details that were classified at the highest level. It showed design elements that had never been shared with any species outside the Dominion. It showed proof that the humans had been watching them for a very long time. Korvax opened a channel to Vexel. High Commander, we have received another message from the humans. Vexel's voice came back hard and cold. I know. I received the same message. Continue your approach. High Commander, the schematic they sent. I said continue your approach, Commander. That is an order. Korvax closed the channel. He looked at his bridge crew. They were staring at their stations, afraid to meet his eyes. They had all seen the schematic. They all knew what it meant. The humans knew everything about them, and they still had no idea what the humans really were. In 4 hours, the fleet would arrive at Earth. In 4 hours, they would finally learn the truth. Korvax hoped they would survive the lesson. Back on the Dominion homeworld, Vexel stood alone in his command center. The star map showed the fleet as a cluster of blue dots moving toward a single yellow star. 300 ships, 50,000 soldiers, the might of an empire that had never known defeat. He thought about the legend of the gardeners. He thought about the ancient maps showing a protected zone. He thought about the schematic that proved the humans had been watching for centuries or longer. For the first time in his life, Vexel considered the possibility that he had made a terrible mistake. For the first time, he wondered if the Dominion was about to face something it could not conquer, but it was too late to turn back. The fleet was committed. The galaxy was watching. History would judge this moment forever. In 4 hours, everything would change, one way or another. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system. 300 warships emerged from folded space and reformed into battle formation. Their weapons powered up, their shields activated. Their sensors reached out across the void to scan the system ahead. Fleet Commander Korvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Fury. His hands gripped the railing in front of him as he waited for the sensor data to appear on his screens. Report, he ordered. His sensor officer worked the controls with trembling fingers. Scanning the system now, Commander. I am detecting 8 planets orbiting a yellow star. The third planet matches our records for Earth. Population centers are visible on the surface. Primitive satellites in orbit. No defensive platforms detected. No warships detected. Korvax felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. The system looked exactly as the scouts had described. A primitive world with basic technology, no weapons that could threaten the fleet, no defenses that could slow them down. Perhaps the human messages had been bluffs after all. Perhaps the ancient legends were just legends. Perhaps this would be a simple conquest like 1,000 others before it. "Move the fleet forward," Korvax commanded. "Standard approach pattern. We will establish orbit around Earth and begin landing operations." The 300 ships began to move. Their engines glowed blue against the darkness of space. They passed the outer planets of the solar system, giant balls of gas and ice that held no interest for the Dominion. Their target was the small blue world ahead. The fleet crossed the orbit of the sixth planet, then the fifth, then the fourth. Everything remained quiet. No challenge came from the humans. No defense force rose to meet them. Korvax began to relax. Perhaps the humans realized they could not win. Perhaps they are waiting to surrender. His sensor officer made a strange sound, something between a gasp and a scream. "Commander, the sensors are detecting something." "What?" "I do not know how to describe it, sir. Space is changing." Korvax looked at the main view screen. For a moment, he saw nothing unusual, just the empty blackness between worlds. Then the blackness began to move. Structures appeared where there had been nothing before. Massive stations materialized out of empty space. Ships emerged from hiding, thousands of them, tens of thousands, more ships than Korvax had ever seen in one place. The void around the fleet filled with technology that made Dominion vessels look like toys built by children. The stations were the size of moons. Their surfaces bristled with weapons and sensors and systems that Korvax could not identify. The ships ranged from small craft to vessels that dwarfed his flagship. They moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the Dominion fleet in a sphere of overwhelming power. "What? What is happening?" someone on the bridge whispered. Korvax could not answer. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. One moment the system had been empty. The next it was filled with the largest military force in galactic history. The humans had not been hiding their weakness. They had been hiding their strength. "Commander, we are being hailed," the communications officer said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Put it through," Korvax managed to say. A face appeared on the view screen. It was a human face, female with dark hair and calm brown eyes. She wore simple clothing with no military markings. She looked like she could be anyone, a teacher, a merchant, a mother. "Greetings," she said. Her voice was warm and friendly. "My name is Sarah Chen. I am a diplomat representing humanity. I apologize for the dramatic revelation, but we have learned that some species respond better to demonstrations than to words." Korvax found his voice. What is all this? Our scouts reported that you were primitive, that you had no technology beyond basic space travel." Sarah smiled. "Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see. We have been watching your Dominion for a very long time, Commander. We know your methods. We know that you send scouts before you send fleets. So we showed your scouts a primitive world filled with divided, warring nations. We showed them exactly the kind of target that would attract your attention." "Why?" Korvax asked. "Why would you pretend to be weak?" "Because we wanted to have this conversation," Sarah replied. "We wanted to show you the truth in a way you would understand. You see, Commander, we are not what you think we are. We are not the creators of the galaxy. We are not gods. We are simply a species that has been around for a very long time. Long enough to learn some important lessons." A small ship detached from one of the massive stations. It moved toward the Dominion flagship slowly and peacefully. Korvax watched it approach with a mixture of fear and fascination. "I would like to come aboard your vessel," Sarah said. "I would like to explain some things to you face to face. You have my word that I mean no harm to you or your crew. I am coming alone and unarmed." Korvax thought about refusing. He thought about ordering the fleet to open fire. He thought about dying in a blaze of defiant glory. But then he looked at the screens showing the human fleet. He saw the impossible numbers. He saw the terrible power. And he knew that defiance would mean nothing but death. "Permission granted," he said. 20 minutes later, Sarah Chen walked onto the bridge of the Dominion's Fury. She was shorter than Korvax expected. She moved with the casual confidence of someone who had absolutely nothing to fear. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. "I know this must be very confusing and frightening for you." "Frightening?" Korvax laughed bitterly. "You have surrounded my fleet with enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. I think frightening is an understatement." Sarah nodded. "I understand. But I want you to know that we have no intention of destroying your fleet. We never did. We could have eliminated your ships the moment they entered our system. We chose not to." "Why?" Sarah sat down in one of the bridge chairs. She looked around at the crew members who were staring at her with wide eyes. "Long ago," she began, "there was a species that seeded life across this galaxy. You know them as the gardeners. They created thousands of civilizations. They watched those civilizations grow and evolve, and then they vanished, leaving their children to find their own way." "The legends are true?" Korvax asked. "Partially," Sarah said. "The gardeners were real. They did create life across the galaxy, but they did not vanish. They simply changed. They evolved beyond physical form. They became something else, something we do not fully understand." "And humanity? Are you their descendants?" Sarah shook her head. "No, we are their final experiment. Earth was created as a test. The gardeners wanted to see if a species could evolve naturally, without guidance, and still develop wisdom alongside power. They wanted to know if their children could be trusted with the galaxy they had created. And you passed this test." "We almost failed," Sarah admitted. "There were times when we came very close to destroying ourselves. We had wars. We had hatred. We had all the darkness that young species carry within them. But in the end, we chose a different path. We learned that power without wisdom is meaningless. We learned that conquest brings only emptiness. We learned that the true measure of strength is knowing when not to use it." Korvax processed her words. "So humanity is not weak. You simply choose not to fight." "We choose not to conquer," Sarah corrected. "We will fight to protect ourselves and others. But we will not seek to dominate. The galaxy is not a prize to be won. It is a garden to be tended. Then why reveal yourselves now? Why not simply destroy us and be done with it?" Sarah leaned forward. "Because destruction is easy. Change is hard. The Dominion has spent 10,000 years conquering. That is all your species knows. But it does not have to be all you ever know. You can change. You can grow. You can become something better than conquerors." Korvax stared at her. "You want to save us?" "We want to give you a choice," Sarah said. "You can leave this system peacefully and begin the slow process of changing your ways. It will take generations. It will be difficult, but we will help you. We have helped other species before. Many of the civilizations you consider allies were once conquerors like you. They learned. You can learn too. And if we refuse, if we open fire," Sarah's expression did not change, "then you will discover what the gardeners built us to protect. But I do not think you will refuse. I think you are smarter than that." "Commander?" Korvax looked at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but he also saw something else. Hope. The hope that maybe they could survive this. The hope that maybe there was another way. He thought about his family back home. He thought about the children he wanted to see grow up. He thought about all the worlds the Dominion had burned, and he wondered if those worlds had ever really been a threat. The choice was his: fire and death and defiance, or survival and change and hope. It was not a difficult choice at all. Fleet Commander Korvax stood in silence for a long moment. The weight of history pressed down on his shoulders. Behind him, 300 ships waited for orders. Before him, a single human woman offered something no conquered species had ever offered the Dominion: a second chance. "You ask me to betray everything my people have believed for 10,000 years," Korvax said slowly. "You ask me to admit that we have been wrong since the beginning of our history." Sarah nodded. "Yes, I know it is not easy. The hardest thing any species can do is look at itself honestly, to see the harm it has caused, to accept responsibility for that harm. Most species never manage it, but some do." "Some do," Sarah agreed. "The Krellians were conquerors once. They burned worlds and enslaved millions. Now they are traders and builders. The Navari used to test their weapons on populated planets. Now they are scientists dedicated to understanding the universe. Change is possible, Commander. It is always possible. Korvax thought about the Krellians. He had traded with them for decades. He had never known they had once been conquerors. He thought about the Novari, whose research had advanced Dominion technology in 100 ways. He had never imagined they had once been destroyers. How long did it take them to change? He asked. The Krellians took 300 years. The Novari took nearly 500. Change is slow. It happens one generation at a time. Children learn from their parents, and they teach their children something slightly different. Over time, the old ways fade, and new ways take their place. And you helped them? Throughout all those centuries? Sarah smiled. We guided them. We offered them alternatives to conquest. We showed them that there were other paths to greatness. But they did the hard work themselves. We cannot force change on anyone. We can only offer the opportunity. Korvax turned to look at the view screen. The human fleet surrounded his ships like a vast and silent wall. Any one of those vessels could destroy his entire force. But they held their fire. They waited. Why do you not simply rule the galaxy? Korvax asked. With this much power, you could control everything. You could force every species to obey you. We could, Sarah admitted. There was a time when some of us wanted to do exactly that. After we passed the gardener's test, after we understood what we had become, there were voices calling for us to take control, to prevent wars, to stop suffering, to force the galaxy into peace. What changed your minds? We realized that forced peace is not peace. It is just another kind of conquest. If we ruled the galaxy, we would not be helping anyone grow. We would be keeping them as children forever. The whole point of the gardener's experiment was to see if wisdom could develop naturally. If we forced our wisdom on others, we would be proving that it could not. Korvax understood. The Dominion had forced its rule on 1,000 worlds, and those worlds had never truly become part of the Empire. They obeyed out of fear, not loyalty. They served because they had no choice, not because they believed in the Dominion's cause. So you watch, he said. You wait. You let species make their own mistakes. Until those mistakes threaten the garden itself, Sarah said, some species cannot be allowed to spread their destruction forever. The galaxy has limits. Resources are not infinite. When a species like the Dominion begins to threaten the balance, we step in. We offer a choice. Most choose wisely, and those who do not, Sarah's expression became sad. They are not destroyed. They are contained, isolated. We seal their systems and prevent them from spreading further. We give them time to reconsider. Some eventually change. Others remain in isolation forever, trapped by their own refusal to grow. Korvax imagined the Dominion sealed behind barriers of human technology, trapped in their own space, unable to expand or trade or interact with the galaxy. It would be a slow death for a civilization built on conquest. That is not much of a choice, he said. No, Sarah agreed, but it is the only choice we can offer. We will not commit genocide. We will not exterminate entire species, no matter what they have done. Every life has value. Every species has the potential to change. But we will also not allow the destruction to continue. The galaxy must be protected. Korvax made his decision. Perhaps it was the sight of the overwhelming human fleet. Perhaps it was Sarah's calm certainty. Perhaps it was simply the exhaustion of a lifetime spent fighting wars that never brought true victory. I will return to my homeworld, he said. I will tell the council what I have seen here. I will recommend that we accept your offer. Sarah stood and walked toward him. She extended her hand in what he recognized as a human gesture of agreement. Thank you, Commander. I know this was not easy, but you have just saved millions of lives, including your own. Korvax took her hand. Her grip was firm and warm. What happens now? Now you go home and begin the hard work. We will send advisors to help guide the transition. We will open new trade routes to replace the wealth you gain from conquest. We will help you find new purposes for your military. It will be difficult and frustrating and slow. But if you stay the course, in a few hundred years, the Dominion will be something your descendants can be proud of. The fleet turned away from Earth. 300 ships that had come to conquer departed in peace. The human vessels did not follow. They simply watched and waited, as they had watched and waited for countless years. Korvac sent a message ahead to Vexal. He reported everything: the hidden fleet, the human diplomat, the offer of change. He did not know how the High Commander would react. He did not know if the Council would accept the truth, but he knew that he had made the right choice. 6 months later, Korvac stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Expansion Council. The star map above still showed 10,000 red stars marking Dominion territory, but the meaning of those stars was changing. Vexal had accepted the human offer. The Council had argued for weeks, but in the end, the choice was clear: change or containment, growth or isolation. Most chose change. Human advisors now worked alongside Dominion officials. Former conquest fleets were being repurposed for exploration and trade. Vassal species were being offered independence and partnership instead of subjugation. It was messy and difficult and painful. Old ways died hard. Many resisted. Some still dreamed of the glory days of conquest. But generation by generation, the Dominion was becoming something new. 20 years passed, then 50, then 100. The red stars on the map began to change color. They turned blue to represent partnership instead of possession. Species that had been slaves became allies. Worlds that had been stripped of resources became thriving trade centers. The Dominion survived. But it was no longer the Dominion. It was the Confederation, a union of equals instead of a pyramid of masters and servants. And at the center of the new Confederation's charter was a simple principle borrowed from the humans. True strength is knowing when not to fight. 300 years after the day when Earth was marked as Target 4771, a young Valorian student sat in a classroom on her homeworld. Her teacher was explaining the history of their species. Long ago, the teacher said, our ancestors were conquerors. They believed that power came from taking what others had. They believed that strength meant forcing others to obey. What changed? The student asked. The teacher smiled. They met the humans, and the humans taught them a better way. They taught them that the strongest species in the galaxy is not the one that conquers the most worlds. It is the one that helps the most species grow. The student thought about this. Why did the humans help our ancestors? They could have destroyed them. They could have, the teacher agreed, but destruction would not have changed anything. It would have only proved that the old ways were right. By offering mercy, by offering help, the humans showed our ancestors that there was another path. And our ancestors, for all their faults, were wise enough to take it. The student looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a small blue world, the species that had changed everything was still watching, still waiting, still hoping that the garden they tended would continue to grow. She smiled and returned to her studies. There was so much to learn, so much to discover, so much to build. And somewhere, Sarah Chen's great-great-grandchildren looked up at those same stars and smiled as well. The experiment was working. The garden was growing. It had taken 10,000 years. But the Dominion had finally learned what the humans had known all along. The universe was not a battlefield to be conquered. It was a home to be shared. And there was room enough for everyone.